before the season even starts through training camp, she suffers the ACL injury. She hasn't been with the team, obviously playing as she's been recovering, but I know that you have been keeping tabs on her progress and kind of how they have been keeping her involved in things just to keep her still intact with the system and things of that nature. Can you talk a bit about what Coach Johnson and the organization has been trying to do to help continue to get her acclimated as she's waiting, obviously, to get back from the ACL injury?
Cool. Yeah, no problem. It's kind of wild because for a player that has been out from the third practice of training camp is when she went down. I wrote about this last week. Just the fact that both Sydney Johnson and teammates keep bringing her up and talking about her unprompted really made me interested and want to write and find out, what was going on, because you see her, she's at all the practices. They've got her on the sideline during games, and she's as I learned through the reporting process, she's charting different stuff at the end of games. After end of each game, she's actually filing a report to Sydney Johnson to kind of keep her engaged and keep her just kind of working with the team and within the system. And it's just wild because she's still having an impact. Everybody kind of talked about her basketball mind, and so apparently she's learned the system from the sideline, and everybody really values her opinion and her thoughts. And so she's coming, during timeouts. Sonia Citron mentioned, she said, "Hey, I go to Georgia during timeouts, and I would say, hey, what do you see out here?" And, she's got all of these notes and visions of how somebody's playing her, or look out for this and X, Y, and Z. And so that's happening all the time. And I think it was the first game of the year, or maybe it was, or one of the preseason games. Behind the bench, they had her face, like a cutout of her face attached to a stick, because she still wasn't there, because I think she had just had surgery. But they still wanted her to be present. And in the games where she's not there, everybody talks about she's constantly blowing up their phones. They come back into halftime and they've got 5 messages from Georgia saying, "Look out for this," or "Hey, this, da 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 da. Good job with this." So she's like really involved, and everybody appreciates her basketball mind. They said, it's that point guard in her. I talked to her college coach, Kenny Brooks, and he said, he called her the smartest player he's ever worked with, and really said when he had her, he wanted to put her in a Steve Nash type position, because he wanted to take advantage of her decision making and just the way she's just the way her mind is. He used an example, said by the end of her career, while they were in Kentucky, they were like seeing the same things and making play calls, and sometimes they would make the exact same play call. Sometimes she would have something she saw that she'd want to run, and he was like, "Yeah, you call it, you run it." Sydney Johnson mentioned the other day they were in practice and working on some new actions, and they quite frankly messed it up. And he was like taking a mental note to kind of go back over with the team of it. And he looks up and he caught Georgia's eye on the sideline and said she had peeped the same thing right there in live time. And he was like, and he caught that, said, okay, she's already thinking on this level and noticing things on this level. So yeah, they're keeping her super involved, and even though she's not on the floor, they really value her input. And it sounds like she's really having, and quite frankly, she's just got a personality that people really love to be around, and so the teammates can't stop raving about her, which is wild to me for a rookie who's quite frankly hasn't been on the court and played a single game, and has really only been a participant in 2-3 practices.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about like who Georgia is as a player, like watching her in college, all that makes sense as far as just, like her IQ and how tapped in she's been. I mean, when Martin and I were sitting down, like going over the draft, and we were watching the draft together. Those 3 picks, Georgia, Sonia, and Kiki. I thought that was like the perfect 3 picks for various reasons, and I'm looking forward to when Georgia's healthy. But I think one thing that's caught me by surprise with all this is, and this is no slight to Jade Melvin or Shug Sutton, but I was worried coming into the season once it was announced that she suffered the ACL injury that the point guard, like the guard play, would suffer a bit, and maybe we would see Brittany Sykes probably doing what we saw Ariel Atkins doing a lot last season, which is taking more of the responsibility at the lead guard role. When you look at what Jade Melvin and Shug Sutton have been able to do, obviously in their very different, approaches to the game, and they're very different styles of play, obviously related compared to a Georgia Amoore. Do you what's your pulse on, like, I guess, how Coach Johnson is feeling about their progress and their impact on the team at this point, given the circumstances?
I think he likes the way they're playing. They're still kind of splitting time. Suge is kind of getting the start, but Jade is playing more minutes traditionally. And so, Jade's a little bit more of a offensive threat, and she gets downhill with a little bit more force and pushes the pace in a way that Sydney Johnson wants to play. But she does get a little loose with the ball at times. And so they like Suge because she's kind of a little bit more steadier, less kind of swings in terms of turnovers, but she's not the same kind of offensive threat. So they both bring different things to the game. I think Suge might be a little bit better defender at the time right now. But I think, hey, listen, they went and drafted a point guard in the first round for a reason, and we knew that. We knew coming into the season that they would like to add to that point guard depth, and I think they're still kind of in that situation. And really, and that was the weird thing. They've talked so much about Georgia and losing her. It sounds like she was going to. She sounded like she had made already so much of an impression that she was going to get plenty of minutes and really, quite frankly, challenge for a starting position before she went down. And so I think they're getting by. It from game to game, it kind of shifts almost where, they wanted Brittany Sykes to be off ball, but sometimes you see her. I think it was last game, not last night, but the game before that, it seemed like she had the ball in her hand an awful lot. So I think they're still kind of figuring that out a little bit. And you can kind of tell because when they're out and running, they look really good. And when they're in transition and getting up and down the floor, they look really good. But at times when they get when they're in that half court set and they've got to slow things down and run actual sets and offense, that's when things kind of get a little bit bogged down. And shoot, before things got picked up last night over the last three quarters, they had gone three straight quarters, the second half of the previous game, and then the first quarter last night of not scoring more than 12 points. I think it was 12, I think 11, 12, and 11, something like that. Anyways, when they're not getting out and running, that offense can get a little sticky. And so I think that's what they were had. Brittany Sykes kind of, got going last night, but I still think they would like to see a little bit more from that point guard play. So, but at the moment that, it's Jade and Suge holding down the fort right now, but I know for sure they're looking forward to Georgia. And, in the off season with those three picks, we knew that sixth pick was probably going to be a point guard. It just depended on which point guard that they ended up liking, and they went with Georgia.